Hi, my name is Lexi Jong and welcome to my channel. For those of you who don't know me yet, I like to talk about luxury makeup here. And today we are talking about the SUQQU Pre-Holiday collection. So I had actually reserved this and ordered it right away from Selfridges when it came out, but something happened with my package, so I got mine later than everybody else. But it was just released at Harrods now, so all of the items are available again. And what we have here is we have a cheek palette, the 102 cheek palette, and 2 eyeshadow quads, and 2 of the lip fog lipsticks. So I'm gonna go ahead and share with you an unboxing, and then I have 3 looks to share with you before we go over my thoughts. I also have a wear test in there, so make sure you take a look at that. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when my next video pops up, so you won't miss any more information like this. Thanks so much, and let's head on to the unboxing. I just received my SUQQU Pre-Holiday set. So I ordered the entire collection. So if you were to do that, you could order the, what is it called? The Silk and Sparkle kit, which is the same price as if you were to purchase everything individually, but it does come all in a set, so you don't have to worry about, trying to pick up everything before it sells out quickly. So I have that, and it comes in this box, and everything is packaged in here. So let's take a look. We have the Designing Color Eyes palette in 135 right here. That looks really pretty. Right, so these are the swatches for these shades here. Let me just make the bottom one a little better. Let's take a look at these swatches here. So first up, we have this petal pink shade with gold micro glitter in it. So you can see it's very sparkly. Next up, we have a fuchsia satin matte. So it's a matte with a little bit of a satin sheen to it. It's kind of a cross between, it's like a plum wine shade. Next up, we have this beautiful orange shade, and this is going to be a true satin finish. There's a tiny, tiny bit of sparkle in there, but not to the point where you're actually seeing like any particles of glitter or anything. But you can see when I move my arm how it's catching the light. There's very, very fine, scarce pieces of micro glitter in there, but it's it's dispersed very well. So anyway, this shade here is kind of like a pumpkin shade with a brick red / burnt pumpkin under, kind of mixed in there. So it's not going to be straight up orange. There is a little bit of a red, like a brick reddish tone to it. And it's really beautiful. That actually surprised me. And you can see when you shear it out, it becomes like this lighter, more pumpkin shade. Next up, we have a matte shade, and this is like a deep aubergine shade, kind of a deep eggplant purple. And the palette comes with 2 tools. You have a foam tip applicator and a brush. So you can see that the foam tip applicator, we have a more rounded end, and then we have a pointier end. And then the brush, we have a small and a large end here. So these are gonna be pretty useful, I think, if you were traveling or something. This here is the Designing Color eyeshadow palette in 136. This one looks a little bit more neutral. It's more like mauve tone. Let's take a look at these swatches. All right, I'm just gonna fix that bottom one. Sorry, I was trying to avoid the imprint, the SUQQU print on there, so I'm just not getting enough shadow on my finger to swatch on the pinky. So it's not the shadows that are having an issue, it's just I didn't pick up enough. So you can see that this quad here is a little bit warmer than the 135 quad. And the first shade here is going to be a peachy shade with a little bit of gold and silver micro glitter in there. It's very pretty. Then we have a light peachy rose shade. So this is actually more of a pink shade, like a dusty rose with some peach in there. And then we have this more medium toned rose. And again, this one also has a little bit of a brick reddish undertone to it. You can see it as it kind of smears out. There's a little bit of a deep warm rose tone to that as well. And this is going to be a satin finish. This one here is a satin matte. And then we have this matte shade here, which is going to be a nice rich chocolate brown. And next up, we have the new cheek palette, and this is in 102. So you can see there is a piece of plastic on top. There was a piece of plastic for the eyeshadows as well. So this is the 102 palette. You can see this is going to be much more of like warm tones. It's very, very autumnal in my opinion. Let's take a look at some swatches. I'm going to swatch the top row and then the bottom row. This color again. So this here is the top row. So we have a blush, highlight, blush, and you can see that this one here is going to be more of an orangey tone, kind of like a clay colored blush that could be really pretty on warm colorings. And then we have this bright gold metallic. Actually, it's not super bright, but it is a medium tone gold highlight. And then this is a rosy mauve toned blush. So these two here are technically highlights. They're gonna be a little too deep for me with that. This first shade here is kind of like a camel brown shade, a little bit more tan in it than a normal camel, but this is what that looks like. And you can see you've got that metallic sheen to it. And then we have this kind of like punchy, brighter pink, and it's got some warm undertones to it, but it is a brighter, punchy pink in my opinion. And then last up, this highlight is more of a bronze shade. So we've got quite a few combinations here. And the thing I love about these cheek palettes is mixing and matching. So if there's a shade there that doesn't seem like it'll work for you, first of all, you know, you can use that on other parts of your face, like your eyes and so forth as well. But mixing and matching them, I think, really does help as well. And next up, we have two new liquid fogs. And I really like the fogs that I have so far. So if you are unfamiliar with the packaging, I do have a video up when these first came out, but you have more of the matte black finish to show you that this is going to be more of a matte finish. It's not a true matte though, it's definitely creamy. And then you have brushed gold on the top, again, to indicate that you have a matte finish inside. And this is the shade 102. And both of these shades are limited edition. So this is 102 here. And then we have 103. And this one is also a fog or more matte finish. And you can see you do have like the applicator on these is like a doe foot, but this is very flexible. It bends. So it acts a little bit more like a paintbrush. So 102 is going to be kind of like a peachy nude shade. You've got a little bit of, you know, soft chocolate undertones to it, but it's more of a peach shade. And then 103 is going to be more of a rosy mauve shade. Very interested in testing out both of these. So let's go ahead and get started on the first look. I have the Hourglass Veil Eye Primer on. We're going to start off with the Sonia G Classic Crease into this lighter shade here. I just want to show you while I have this palette up close that you can see that even though these are technically both mattes, if you look closely at the finish, this one you can see that there is more of a satin sheen to it than this one. Next up, we're taking the same brush and I'm going into the chocolate brown. I'm going to dab a little bit of this in the outer corner here. And I'm just going to kind of take the residue and put that in the crease as well. Next, I'm taking the SUQQU T7 into the satin pink shade. This one comes up super, super easily. All this dust is what I knocked off of the brush. Wow, look at that sheen. That's really kind of awesome. So you can see as you apply it to the lid and it's catching the light, you get a little bit more dimension. I'm actually seeing like a little bit more of a reddish tone to it as well. And I like the way it looks over the brown. Okay, I wiped off the T7. I'm going to go into the sparkly shade here. And this is not going to be a topper shade per se. There is pigment to this. So if you apply it very lightly, you can get more of just a topper effect. But you can wear this shade on its own and get color. I like how this kind of just tones down a little bit of that redness. I love the sparkle. All right, taking the classic crease, and I don't have any additional shadow. I wiped it off after my last use. And then I'm taking the Rephr 03 brush and I'm going into the sparkly shade. I'm twirling the brush in it, knocking it off, and I'm going to add this to the inner corner. So you can see how pigmented the actual shade is on its own as well. I'm going to drag a little bit of this under the eye. All right, I wiped the brush off and now I'm going into the chocolate brown, and I'm going to put this on the upper lash line, sticking pretty close to the lashes. Okay, so what's left on that brush is going on the lower lash line. And this is the first look up close. And I'm gonna go ahead and finish the rest of my eye makeup, and then I'll meet you back here to do cheeks. So I have this SUQQU soft cheek here. We're gonna go into this more mauve tone shade. Let's test this out. And the blush comes up easily. I'm going very lightly. All right, so this one is a little softer, so I can go in a little bit harder. Let's get some more pigment on the brush. All right, so this one is really nice. This color I think works well for me. I'll add a little bit more so you guys can really see the color, but it gives a nice kind of like a dusty rose flush. So not super pigmented. I'm not saying that there isn't pigment in the blush, but it is one of those formulas that you can build up, which I really appreciate, especially with these deeper shades in this palette. I think on the other side, let's try this more pumpkin shade. I have to say, when I was swatching these, I was a little nervous that these colors wouldn't work for me, but they actually go on so nicely. So they're definitely a buildable formula. Obviously, I could take a denser brush and get more pigment on my cheeks in the first place, but I think this is really nice. So you can see it's not too orange on my cheeks, actually. It kind of just has this really nice autumnal look, in my opinion. So which side do you like better, the mauve or the pumpkin? For highlight, let's try this more brown shade here. And I'm using the SUQQU Sculpt 3 brush. And let's just start by dabbing a little bit here. Just see what that does. All right, so that is definitely too deep. Even though I barely use any, it's just not gonna work for me as a highlight. Let's kind of blend this in a little bit. I'm gonna take some of the mauve blush again and kind of go over that. so it's a little bit better with something going over it. But you can see how deep it is. It really deepened the blush in that area as well. So that is going to be a shade I'll probably use more on my eyes than anywhere else. Just to make the sides even, we're going to add the same highlight over here. We'll see if it has a different effect with the pumpkin. And I have to say it does look a little bit better with this shade. It is still, I think, a little bit too dark. You can see when I turn, I get the kind of that weird shadow. So let's go ahead and blend this one out as well. All right, so there we go. Highlighter didn't work out so well, but I think the blushes that I used were beautiful. So just to keep my sides looking a little similar, I'm going to just add a little bit of the opposite color on each cheek so they have the same shades. All right, so these are the shades all mixed together, and I think it is time to add a little finishing powder, and then we're going to try on one of the lipsticks today. For finishing powder, I'm taking the SUQQU Holiday powder from last year. This is the Eclat Dew, and I have the SUQQU Master Face Brush. And this powder is a little, you know, it's technically supposed to be translucent, but it does have a little bit of a whitish cast to it. But it has the most beautiful kind of velvety satin finish to the skin. I just think it gives a really nice look. And anytime because it has a little touch of whiteness to it, anytime I go overboard with blush or something, this really does kind of help tone it down and give it a more natural appearance. All right, we're going to take the SUQQU Fog in 102. All right, so this is 102. So this is the final look for today from a distance, and I have to say that this Fog 102 is just a little bit more matte than the other Fog lipsticks that I have. The other Fog ones that I have really just seem, you know, they're a little bit creamier than this. Not that this is not creamy. There is a creamy texture to it, but it does feel like it's going to dry down a little bit more than the others do. So I'm going to do a wear test with these and I will let you know how this goes. But I personally really love the Fog formula. I have 2 of them so far and I find them very comfortable on the lips. They last super well. I mean, even when you're eating and so forth, you know, they stay on and they stay comfortable. The other 2 I have do not completely dry down. However, I can tell that this one, although it hasn't dried down per se, it has dried down a little bit more than the other 2 that I have. So we're gonna see how this goes throughout the day. Thanks for joining me. It has been 6 hours since I applied my makeup and I wanted to give you an update on the Fog liquid lipstick. So I'm gonna bring you in closer so you can take a good look at it. This is what the lipstick looks like now after 6 hours. So you see, I still have pigment. I have a little bit of pigment left on my lips. Mostly though, the pigment is clinging more towards like certain areas of my lip, specifically like drier areas and so forth. But I don't have a lot of my natural lip color shining through. It's just that it's more diluted in some areas versus others. But the texture of this, it stayed creamy for a while, but then I guess about 4 hours in, and I had already eaten, I had eaten a couple times already by then, but about 4 hours in, it went from the creamy matte texture to more of the dry texture. However, I have to say that it doesn't feel dry like other matte lipsticks where it starts to get a little tight. It really just feels like I don't have anything on my lips. So I just don't really feel any of the slip. And when I rub my lips together, I have a little bit of that powdery matte feeling, but not as much as I get from a regular matte lipstick. So I just don't really feel much of it. While we're up close, let's just take a look at how the eyes have held up. And I do have the Hourglass Veil eye primer on. So that's everything. Overall, I have to say that I am happy with how this fog lipstick has performed. The other shades that I have in the permanent line of these, they do feel a little bit creamier. They stay creamier a little bit longer. However, unless you're getting really up close to my lips, I feel like from a normal distance, it still looks like I have plenty of pigment on my lips. I don't really notice any like dispersion of the color or anything like that. So I feel like it still looks decent. And honestly, I would just top this with a little lip balm and I think it would look totally fine. So let's try it. Actually gonna top it with the Tom Ford lip balm, the Balm Frost. So here are the lips topped with the Balm Frost, and let me bring you in a little closer. So here you go. And honestly, you know, if you look really closely, like I got in a magnifying mirror and took a look, and the actual SUQQU pigment, I still see like a little bit more pigment on some of the drier areas of my lips. That pigment didn't really move around per se, but adding the lip balm on top, I don't think it's evident, you know, it just actually it has basically refreshed the whole look in my opinion. So I think this is a great way to do it. If all I have to do is add a little lip balm when my lips start feeling a little dry from this and I look like I freshly applied lipstick, I am totally happy with that. So still very happy with the fog lipsticks. Okay, we are starting with number 135 and I'm going to go into this more magenta shade. This is the SUQQU Crease 2. I'm just going to get a little bit on the tip. So there's some, try and knock that off. And then let's go ahead and I'm going to be very careful adjusting this in the crease. So just dab a little extra there in the corner. And then I'm actually going to wipe off the rest of my brush and then blend it in. Using the same brush, I'm going into the Deep Eggplant shade. I'm just going to take a tiny dab of this and put this just right here on the outer corner. Next up, I have the Chantecaille Shade and Sweep eye brush. I'm going into the orange. I'm going to add this to the inner portion here. Wow, that's a little bit more pigmented than I was expecting. I wiped off the brush and now I'm just going to take kind of the same brush and just kind of feather out those edges a little bit. Same brush going into the magenta shade. I'm just going to put a little bit of this right here on the edge of the eggplant. Back in with the crease 2 with no shadow and just kind of blending these. Now I'm taking the Shade and Sweep into this pink sparkly shade. I'm going to start in the center here and then I'm going to work my way out. So just kind of tapping over the other shades there. Add just a little bit more here in the center. Crease 2 one more time, just quick cleanup. For the upper lash line, I'm taking the SUQQU Pencil 1 in deep purple. Okay, whatever's left on the brush is going in this lower lash line. Wiping the brush off and now just kind of smudging the lower lash line a little bit more. I wiped off the pencil brush and I'm just going to twirl the tip in the light pink and just add a little bit of this to the inner corner here. And I'm adding what's left to the brow arch. And then I'm taking the crease 2 and kind of softening that a bit. So this is the look up close. going to finish my mascara, and then while we're up close, we will do some more with the cheek palette. I am taking the SUQQU. This is the Z series brush that is the highlight brush, and I'm gonna go into this highlight here. And we're going to put this kind of all over the cheek, just lightly. Just kind of want to see what it's gonna look like. All of these swatched so darkly, I'm a little nervous. Actually, I think this one though could work as a regular highlight. I mean, I made it a little bit deeper right now, but I think with a fluffy fan brush, this one would work as a traditional highlight. So we'll try that in a second. On top of the highlight, I'm gonna go into this like more reddish shade here. And this is the Rephr 05 brush. So I'm just getting a little bit up. Yeah, that's pigmented. And this brush isn't traditionally a blush brush because it's kind of like angled here, whoosh, whoosh. And because of that, you know, it does better with this kind of motion than more of a swirly motion. All right, so super shiny. Let's see what this shade of blush looks like on this side. So I'm using the same brush, but I did wipe it off. And let's go ahead and check it out. So the pigment of the blush actually goes down a little bit softer without having the highlight there as a base. I think the highlight accentuates it. So at the moment, I prefer the blush without the highlight underneath. This is definitely too deep for me. I'm going to have to kind of work on that. But this is the Rephr 20 brush. Let's go into the same highlight shade here and let's just see how light we can get it. So I just have a light dusting here on the brush. All right, so if I go in lightly, I think that works. So yeah, I'm not seeing any weird shadows. All right, so that definitely works a little bit better. Let's also try the gold highlight. Since we haven't tried that, we're gonna use the fan brush for that as well. I'm just gonna add a little accent of that right above the cheek here. Just see, so that one is a little bit darker. I think the gold one is just a little bit too much. I'm taking the SUQQU Smooth Buffer and I'm just gonna kind of buff all of this together a little bit. All right, that looks a little bit better to me. Now this side is really stark, so honestly, I am going to take my cloth and wipe some of it away before buffing. I'm being gentle, I don't want to move the foundation, but I do want to get anything that is sitting on top. So I'm actually doing like a pressing motion. Right, now I'm going to take the Smooth Buffer and just kind of buff what's here. It's still super dark compared to the other side. Let's see here. All right, going back in with the Rephr 05 and into just the blush. I'm gonna add a little bit more of the blush. I'm gonna add this to the other side here too, to try to balance them a little bit. And I wiped off the Smooth Buffer and I'm gonna go ahead and buff this. Okay, so that's it for the blush and the highlight. And I am going to add a little finishing powder and I'll meet you back there. Okay, so that's it for the blush and highlight. I am taking the Guerlain Holiday Meteorite, so it's this tin, but I'm just using what's on the lid here. This is the SUQQU Face One. I'm just gonna add a little bit on here, and it's just kind of a sparkly meteorites, so I'm just going to use that little bit and buff. Before I move you out, let's go ahead and try the lipstick. This is number 103. This is the pinkier version. And let's go ahead and try this on. All right, so here is this shade in number 103, and I am going to show you from a distance. And this is the final look from a distance. And yeah, so the cheeks actually turned out pretty well, and I don't really see any issues here. The texture of this fog lipstick feels just like the 102 that I wore yesterday. And I have to say, I did that 6-hour check-in, but you know, after I added that Tom Ford lip balm, I reapplied it, I think, one more time that day, and I got a full day's wear out of this, like 10 hours. So I think that's a winner in my book. And I just find them very comfortable. So the fog lipsticks, I'm really enjoying them. Starting off with 136, and this is the Blender Pro brush from Sonia G, going into this shade here. Switching over to a 135 palette, same brush, and getting just a tiny bit of the dark eggplant purple. And I'm gonna add this to the crease very, very lightly. And I'm trying to stick more in the crease. So the first shade I kind of buffed a little bit more all over. And this I'm being more targeted, just to add some depth. Taking the same brush and going into the dark brown on the 136, I'm gonna add this to the inner or the outer corner. Now I'm taking the Builder 2 from Sonia G, and I'm going into this sparkly shade, and this is the 136 palette. And I'm gonna add this on the outer half, and I'm tapping over the brown. Wiping off that brush, and I'm gonna go into the pink sparkly shade on 135. I'm gonna add this to the inner half of the eye. And I forgot to mention, I do not have any primer on today, so this is on bare lids. For the lower lash line, I'm going in with the Sonia G Smudger 1 into this shade here in the 136. Taking a touch of the chocolate brown, just a little bit, and I'm gonna add this to the outer portion and just kind of bring it up a little bit. And then the upper lash line I'm doing with the chocolate brown. I wiped off the smudger brush, and now I'm going in the cheek palette in the gold highlight. I'm just gonna add a touch of this to the inner corner here. Just gonna add a touch of this under the brow as well. Taking the Blender Pro that I used before and just kind of feathering in that highlight a little bit. All right, and that is the eye look up close, and I am going to go ahead, let's do cheeks, and then I'll finish my eyes and everything. For cheeks, I'm gonna do a mix of the mauve and the red tone, and I'm using the Wayne Goss airbrush. And I do have some mask lines on my face, so please excuse those. Had to take the girls to the pediatrician this morning for vaccines, and the mask lines, you know, they take a while to go away sometimes. We're not gonna do any highlight on my face. I really think just these three are a little bit too dark for me, so I'm gonna skip that. I'm just gonna apply some finishing powder and some mascara to my brows, and I will meet you back. This is the final look from a distance. And on my lips, I have a mix of the 102 and the 103 in the fog formula. And instead of using highlighter today, I just did a dusting of the Guerlain Meteorites from this holiday, which these are sparkling. So that's what I have on, and let's go ahead and discuss my thoughts. Up here, these first 4 swatches are the 135 eyeshadow palette, and these 4 are the 136. And I actually really like both palettes. Formulas are great, no issues with any of the shades in either of the palettes. And I wanted to show you today how opaque these more sparkly shades can be, which is why I use those primarily on my lids, so you can see you can dab them on as a topper, but you can also use them on their own. And I think all of the shades are very pretty. Now, for me personally, I'm not a huge pink eyeshadow person, and surprisingly, I actually like the 136 palette a little bit more. I think the little bit of warmth and peachiness in this just kind of looks a little bit better on my eyes than some of these more vibrant shades do here. But I really, really love this sparkly pink and the eggplant purple. So those two are my favorite for the 135 quad. And the 136, I don't know, I guess I really like the first two and the chocolate brown. This satin shade is really awesome too. Actually, I like the whole quad. So overall, I think the eyeshadows are great. I think they are great quads. And if you're interested in those colors, I think they are worth picking up. These were just released at Harrods, so they are available right now. So on to the cheek palette. So again, this is where the eyeshadow stops. So I actually swatched the blushes and then the 3 highlights first. So you can see here are the 3 blushes and here are the 3 highlights. And I really like this cheek palette. It's a bit warmer than the first one. And I also think there's a little bit of a difference with these actual blushes. These actually show up a little bit more subtly at first. So it's a little bit more buildable. I feel like the other ones go on a little bit stronger at first than these do. So these you kind of have to build up, which I really appreciate with these shades, because otherwise, you know, I have to be super careful and, you know, I have to worry about, you know, making sure everything kind of spreads out nicely so I don't have like, you know, any like patchiness or anything like that. So I like the fact that it's buildable for me. The shades I think are really nice. I really wasn't sure how I'd like this more pumpkin shade, but I really love it. Actually, I love all 3 of these blushes. The blushes are a definite win for me. These highlights, however, right here, they're too dark for me to use as highlights. I can use them on the eyes, which is how I will use these. But for highlights, they just don't really work out for me, either on top or underneath blush. I just think they're a little bit too deep for my skin tone. Now, I also took the liberty of swatching the first cheek palette. So we've got the 4 blushes here, and these are the 2 highlights. And you can see that these 2 highlights are going to be much lighter in tone. So these 2 highlights are definitely much better for my skin tone than these. And I can wear both of these and they look nice. These blushes, as I mentioned, I feel like when you apply them with the brush, they just go on a little bit stronger than these do. They're still going to be a soft buildable blush, but I feel like the 102 palette, you have to kind of, you know, kind of build it up a little bit more than you do with the 101. And I feel like color-wise, they're all different. The closest one is actually going to be like these. It's kind of like a cross of these 2 to get to this more pumpkin shade. So let me go ahead and show those to you. So this here is a mix of these 2 bottom shades in the 101 palette. And you can see that it's still going to be a bit redder and brighter than this one. And out of these here, you know, definitely this more fuchsia shade is very different. And then you kind of have this shade here, which is kind of more of a melon shade in the 101 palette. And let's see what that looks like on its own. So I'm gonna put that one right here so you can kind of see. You can see how it's deeper and it's more orange than the one in the 102, which is gonna have a little bit more rosiness to it. Otherwise, none of these shades are really all that similar. You can see the more mauve tone one in the shade 101 palette is much deeper. I'll swatch those next to each other just so you can see closer. So here's the more mauve tone one from the 101 palette, and you can see that it's definitely going to be deeper. There's more plum in it than it is in the first palette. I misspoke, than it is in the second palette. So here we go. These are the two cheek palettes, and this is 102 right here, and this one here is 101. So this is the first one that came out. These are my lower swatches, and this is the 102 that just came out now. So between the blush palettes or cheek palettes, I really like both of them, and I'm glad that I have both. I think they complement each other well. Again, the highlights from the third palette, I'm not really going to use as highlights. So if you're in the same situation as I am with that palette, you know, it may not be worth it to pick up. However, the blushes in the second palette, you know, I really love how subtly they go on and how you can build them up and you don't have to worry about overcorrecting or anything like that. So I kind of like that slightly better than the blushes in the first palette, just because I feel like I have to be a little bit more careful with the first palette. Now, again, the first palette, those blushes are also soft and buildable, but I just feel like they're a little bit stronger in color than the second palette. And for me, if I had to pick, I would take the blushes from the second palette and the highlights from the first palette. So I don't know how much help that's gonna be. If you have a situation like me though, and you have fair skin and those highlights from the second palette are not gonna work, and you know, you feel like it's just not a good investment, I definitely do recommend this first palette. I love these, and surprisingly, these more like warmer toned shades here, I wear those quite a bit, and I love mixing and matching these, and I think both of these highlights work. Even this one here, which is a little bit deeper, I still think it looks very nice. So, oh, and these also work well on the eyes. Moving on to the Fog liquid lipsticks, I swatched those here. We have 102 on the top and 103 here. So 103 is going to be rosier. 102 is really more of a, you know, it's like a peachy caramel shade. And 103, it's rosy, but again, there's going to be a little bit of a hint of caramel in the base. I love both of these shades. As I mentioned during the wear test, these two lip fogs, they don't stay quite as creamy as long on my lips as the other two that I have from the permanent line, but they still look good all day. So when they dry down matte, you know, just adding a little, I've done lip gloss and I've done lip balm, adding those on top just really refreshes the look. And again, from a distance, you can't tell, like even just like a normal, like standing distance, like a couple feet away, nobody's gonna be able to tell that your lipstick is not fresh anymore once you top it with something. And I really like that. So they last all day for me. Now, these are not transfer resistant. They do transfer. It's just that that base layer of pigments that's actually in contact with your lips really kind of stays put there. So these are not going to be transfer resistant like the Chanel Ultra Tenue glosses, but they last all day. Now, as for the colors, I love both of these colors. I think these are actually my two favorite lip fogs now. And I don't know, I really thought this rosy one would be my favorite, but this more peachy caramel shade 102, I really love it too. I think I'm kind of tied between the two of them. So for me, I'm so glad I picked up both of them. I absolutely love them. And yeah, overall, I would have to say that this collection here was a winner. My favorite items from the collection, no surprise, are the lip fog lipsticks. And then I think following that, I would go with the cheek palette and the 136 eyeshadow palette, and then the 135 you know, would be last on my list. And again, though, I really do like all of them. So that's kind of just my order of preference if I were to prioritize them in some way. So I hope this was helpful. And again, I do have some videos on the lip fogs and lip glow lipsticks from when they first came out like a month ago. So if you're interested in more details about textures and more wear tests, please take a look at that video. I also have another video on the cheek palettes, so take a look at that as well. And if you're interested in how the cheek palette compares to a single blush, that's in my product updates. So I'll leave those videos linked down below in the description box if you're interested in any of those. And I hope this was helpful. So if you liked it, please make sure you hit that thumbs up button. It really does help me as a creator. It helps kind of promote my videos on YouTube, so YouTube actually recommends them. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And follow me on Instagram. I'm at Alexis Jong, and Angela Rogers from SUQQU, she and I just posted a giveaway on there. And if you are interested, you can join that. It's good for a week. I'll have the ending date listed down here. And follow me on Instagram, read the post to figure out how to enter. And that's it. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you soon.